The laughter didn't sting at first. It landed like static, distant, unreal, bouncing off the glass walls of the executive conference room while the overhead lights flickered like they couldn't decide whether to stay alive or just give up. Erin Blake blinked once, twice, trying to process what she was holding. Her badge, deactivated. A note written in Sharpie on company stationery, like some frat boy's idea of a joke. "This isn't personal, just progress." Someone snorted. Greg from product maybe, or that intern who always smelled like vape juice, and the room rippled with suppressed giggles. Not real laughter. The kind that leaks out when people are relieved it's not them standing up there. Erin turned toward the podium, where the head of people was already shifting into that corporate eulogy tone about growth through change. The same guy who once passed her in the kitchen and called her Karen without realizing she'd corrected him 3 times. 8 years. 8 years of holding this circus together with spreadsheets, caffeine, and sheer willpower, while every mediocre executive collected promotions for surviving PowerPoint presentations. She led 3 internal audits that saved the company from FTC sanctions. She single-handedly rebuilt the Atris compliance database after someone's nephew tried to merge gender and favorite fruit columns during a diversity initiative, and now this, fired in front of the entire department. No one made eye contact. Not even the receptionist she once helped smuggle a service dog past facilities. Erin didn't cry. She wasn't built for public tears. She was the kind of woman who corrected policy typos for fun and read legal disclaimers like poetry. But as she walked toward the door, silence followed. Thick, heavy, surgical. The kind of silence that tells you people are already rewriting history without you in it. She didn't look back. She didn't give them the satisfaction. Her heels clicked across the marble floor until she hit the stairwell, then stopped. The envelope in her hand felt heavier now. She opened it. The plastic badge slid out. Blank, gray, lifeless. A coffee ring stain marked the note. They hadn't even bothered with clean paper. Outside, sunlight hit her eyes like a slap. Her phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. "Celebrate 8 years at Kinetic Systems with Erin." She laughed. Sharp, short, bitter. They really thought they'd buried her. Like she wasn't the one who wrote the fireproof blueprints they'd been standing on for years. Erin wasn't a networker. She didn't post motivational quotes or clap like a seal in town halls. She remembered every overlooked clause, every ignored compliance flag, every late-night approval that shouldn't have cleared, and most importantly, every signature. They mistook silence for weakness. It wasn't. It was patience. She went home that night, poured a Diet Coke, added a splash of bourbon, and opened her laptop. A folder sat 3 layers deep in her personal drive, labeled "Break Glass If Screwed." Inside, audit memos, private oversight logs, CEO-signed overrides, SEC correspondence, and one watermarked contract that was her real armor. See, Erin's official title was Senior Risk Analyst, but hidden halfway through her contract was a clause few ever read. Designated Compliance Authority, reports directly to CEO oversight. Termination requires CEO authorization. In plain English, that meant firing her without the CEO's written approval was illegal. And by doing so, they hadn't just removed a paper pusher. They detonated their own legal immunity. She opened another folder, this one called GT Rollup Q3. Hundreds of files, color-coded and categorized, everything she'd ever flagged. At the top, a single PDF titled Clause 9B, DCA Oversight. Her memory jolted like black coffee. 2 years ago, the CEO had called her into his office with no assistant, no calendar invite, just a Slack message. "Need something airtight." He'd been pale then, jaw tight, exhausted. "You're the only one who reads what they sign," he'd said, handing her a document. "Lock it down before I take leave." She thought it was a cleanup. It was a contingency plan. He told her to store it off-site, privately, accessible only through his recovery email. Only open if I'm not around. But the thing was, he still was. Aaron's inbox pinged. A new message. From Jonathan Keene. Subject: You were right. It's happening. Body: Still recovering, but lucid. Reviewing your archive. No action yet. Let them sweat. You're protected. They violated the clause. More soon. Aaron exhaled slowly. This wasn't a restructuring. It was corporate malpractice. Clause 9b, subsection C4. Termination of the designated compliance authority without CEO authorization revoked executive indemnity retroactively. Translation: Every executive action since her firing, bonuses, payouts, contracts, was now exposed. And nobody knew. Not yet. Across the city, the legal department's Slack channel pinged like a fire alarm at 2:13 a.m. Rhea Patel, Associate General Counsel, half asleep in her guest room with a half-finished peppermint tea on the windowsill, squinted at the screen. Subject line: Section 9b, breach. Immediate review required. Sender: Jonathan Keene, CEO. Except the man was supposed to be on medical leave, recovering from chemo in some private facility upstate. Rhea sat up so fast the tea spilled on the sheets. She clicked the message open. Per Contract Clause 9b, subsection C4. The Designated Compliance Authority, DCA, reports solely to CEO oversight. Any termination without written CEO authorization voids all executive indemnity protections retroactively to the time of action. This clause supersedes board-level authority. Attached: Aaron Blake's signed employment contract. Rhea froze, then read it again. It was real. Her mouth went dry. They had fired Aaron, without CEO approval, without a vote, without legal review. And that meant every executive decision since was now legally radioactive. She grabbed her phone and called the chief legal officer, Garrett Rowe. He answered groggily, voice gravel. This better be nuclear. It is, she said, reading the clause aloud. Silence. Then a low, Jesus Christ. Within 5 minutes, the entire legal leadership team was online. Half-dressed, wide-eyed, screens glowing like hospital monitors. They dove into archives, checked timestamps, matched signatures. The picture formed quickly and horribly clear. HR had deactivated Aaron's badge at 12:31 p.m. the previous day. No CEO sign-off, no compliance review, which meant Clause 9b had just detonated across the entire company. Every board-level action after that timestamp, bonuses, promotions, vendor approvals, restructuring, was null and void. Garrett's Slack lit up with panic pings. Do we process payroll? Can we release quarterly bonuses? Do we pause vendor transfers? His answers were short and deadly. No. Pause. Freeze. Everything. Finance confirmed it minutes later. All executive accounts tied to post-termination approvals were locked. $1.2 million in board bonuses. 2 vendor renewals. A CFO retirement plan payout. Gone. On hold. Frozen like amber. And it got worse. Clause 9b automatically flagged their SEC compliance profile as in review. Translation: No one could process Q4 payouts without triggering public disclosure. The company was trapped in its own paperwork. Garrett stared at his monitor, muttering. They laughed her out of the room. He opened Aaron's old folder on the internal drive. There it was, Oversight Certification, DCA Authority. Her digital signature still active, still registered with the SEC as the company's internal regulatory certifier. Meaning anything submitted without her signature was invalid. Retroactively. Oh my God, Rhea whispered. We've been filing non-compliant documents for 36 hours. Garrett rubbed his face. Who approved her termination? Nobody. It was word of mouth. HR says the acting CEO authorized it verbally. Garrett's voice dropped. Without reading the contract. The silence that followed was the kind that makes stomachs drop and careers end. By 3 a.m., the legal team had open tabs labeled CEO exclusive compliance precedent and reverse indemnity case law. Finance pinged again. Payroll batch pending. Proceed? Garrett typed one word. No. And with that, every golden parachute, every SVP bonus, every executive performance payout, frozen. At 3:27 a.m., Garrett leaned back in his chair and whispered, "We need a war room." Meanwhile, across town, Erin sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, laptop glow on her face, the city humming quietly outside her window. She wasn't smiling, wasn't plotting revenge. She didn't need to. The clause was doing the work. They'd handed her the bullet, and she'd loaded it years ago when she wrote the damn compliance policy herself. Her inbox pinged again. Message from Rhea. Confirming Section 9B active, legal reviewing, expect fallout. Erin took a slow sip of her bourbon-laced Coke. She didn't reply. She just opened her compliance dashboard, a mirror version she'd kept archived privately, complete with historical approvals, timestamps, and audit trails. One click, one upload, and her access key refreshed. The system recognized her as authority, executive oversight, the same title they thought they'd erased. She closed the laptop. The night outside was still, patient, electric with anticipation. Tomorrow, they'd wake to a company frozen in place, realizing too late that the woman they mocked had become the clause they could never escape. By sunrise, Kinetic Systems was in silent chaos. Executives woke to frozen bank transfers, locked dashboards, and frantic texts from finance asking, "Did you authorize this?" No one had answers. At 6:42 a.m., every corner office calendar pinged at once. Urgent. Compliance oversight emergency. CEO directive. Attend immediately. Mandatory. No excuses. The subject line hadn't appeared in years, not since the last data breach that cost them $40 million. In the CFO's suite, a cup of scalding espresso tipped onto a stack of reports. In HR, someone whispered, "Oh no," into the void. In operations, the acting CEO, Philip Brandt, stared at his monitor like it had personally betrayed him. He muttered, "Who triggered this?" But before anyone could answer, a second notification appeared. Seat 14 reactivated. Attendance mandatory. That seat hadn't been touched in over 2 years. Everyone knew whose it was. The firewall seat, Erin Blake's, the woman they'd fired yesterday. At 7:56 a.m., she stepped out of a black sedan into the underground parking garage of Kinetic's San Francisco HQ. Her old badge didn't work, not because it was reactivated, but because it had been replaced. New badge, new color strip, slate black, trimmed in silver. Only 3 people in the company held that level of clearance. The security guard saw it, nodded once. "Morning, ma'am." She nodded back. No small talk, just purpose. Black wool coat, pressed slacks, low heels, a manila folder tucked under her arm like a scalpel she had no intention of using. Yet, upstairs, the boardroom was already half full. Brandt sat at the head of the table, pale, sweat pooling at his temples. CFO Morton scrolled through his phone, trying to find a way to spin this. Garrett Rowe from legal looked like he hadn't slept. Rhea Patel was beside him, white-knuckled over a laptop. The door clicked open. Conversations died mid-breath. Erin walked in. The air changed. Pressure. Gravity. Something unspoken that made every spine straighten. She walked to seat 14. It gleamed. Polished. Waiting. A chilled water bottle beside it. She didn't sit. She placed the folder on the table, unbuttoned her coat with deliberate precision, and folded it across the chair back. The silence was surgical. Garrett was the first to speak, voice steady but tight. "The CEO has confirmed reinstatement under Clause 9B. This session is under formal compliance protection. All statements recorded. Notes restricted." Someone whispered under their breath, "Jesus." Another murmured to their assistant, Cancel my lunch. And maybe the next decade. The screen on the far wall flickered, static, then stabilized. There he was, Jonathan Keene, CEO. Thinner, paler, but very much alive. His voice when it came was low, crisp, deliberate. Good morning. I see we've had an event. No one dared to reply. Keene's eyes scanned the room, sharp as scalpels. You fired my designated compliance authority, he said simply. Without authorization, without counsel, without reading the clause you all signed. He paused long enough for the weight of those words to settle. That action stripped every one of you of indemnity, retroactively. That means every dollar, every approval, every contract since 12:31 p.m. yesterday is now in legal limbo. Congratulations. Brant swallowed hard. Sir, this was a misunderstanding? Keene raised one finger. Don't. The word hit like a gavel. You want to explain a compliance breach to the SEC? Be my guest. Rhea leaned toward her mic. Sir, should we proceed with full disclosure? Keene nodded once. Yes, but Erin leads it. Effective immediately, all compliance matters revert to her direct oversight. No intermediaries, no exceptions. He turned his gaze directly toward the camera, toward her. Erin, the floor is yours. She hadn't spoken yet, not a word. But when she did, the sound was calm, cool, detached. We begin with revocation review, she said. Every post-termination decision, every approval, every disbursement, frozen until verified. She turned to Garrett, opened the ledger. As he did, the enormity filled the room. Bonuses, stock options, vendor renewals, all nullified, pending her sign-off. Brant slumped in his chair. CFO Morton whispered. That's half the quarter. Erin just looked at him, unblinking. Then you should have read the fine print. The conference room felt like a pressure chamber, soundless except for the faint hum of the HVAC. Erin didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Her authority wasn't volume. It was ink and law and timing. Garrett read from the printed page in his hand, his voice flat, clinical. For record, Clause 9b states that all actions taken during unauthorized termination of the designated compliance authority are nullified pending CEO review. This includes, but is not limited to, contract approvals, promotions, compensation adjustments, and legal waivers connected to internal oversight. He looked up. That means every executive decision since yesterday afternoon is now suspended. The CFO blinked hard. Are we saying retroactively? Yes, Garrett said, as of the moment her badge was deactivated. You could almost hear the air leave the room. The head of operations asked quietly, What about equity dispersals? Garrett turned another page. Nullified until further determination. A rustle of panic moved around the table. That particular sound of people realizing their parachutes were actually anvils. Erin sat still, her hands folded neatly on the folder she'd brought, eyes scanning faces without emotion. They were sweating, whispering, recalculating their lives in real time. And then the screen flickered again. Keene was still there, his expression unreadable. You think I didn't notice? He asked softly. I saw the footage, the fake smiles, the applause when you stripped her badge like it was a promotion ceremony. His tone was almost conversational, but the undercurrent was lethal. You call that leadership? You fired the one person who made this company compliant enough to survive. He leaned forward slightly. You let greed override caution. Again. No one dared to speak. Brant's throat bobbed like he was swallowing glass. The CEO continued, Let's be clear. I may be half a man these days, hospital bed, IVs, but I'm still the one who signs your indemnities. And as of this morning, you have none. The words landed like gunfire. Erin's compliance authority supersedes every board-level motion you've made. She's not your subordinate, she's your audit trail. And if she finds so much as one unauthorized financial adjustment, she'll have to report it. The room went completely still. The only sound was a phone vibrating on the table before being silenced instantly. Keen's gaze shifted to Erin. "Ms. Blake," he said, "restore what needs restoring, freeze what needs freezing. You're the firewall now." He looked back to the others. "And if anyone here still believes they can bluff their way out of this, just know that the SEC already has her reinstatement on file." The feed cut abruptly, leaving only the reflection of pale faces in the blank screen. Garrett stood, clearing his throat. "All right. Legal review begins now. Finance, pause all payments pending compliance verification. Operations, halt vendor renewals. HR, compile all termination records since Friday." Brant tried for a weak smile. "So this is just a reset?" Garrett didn't blink. "No, this is a reckoning." At 9:04 a.m., the first system alerts began to roll in. 6 executive accounts, locked. Performance bonuses, frozen. Promotions processed under the transition initiative, reversed. Managers started receiving identical notifications. Temporary hold placed on advancement. Contact your supervisor. Except their supervisors were in the same meeting, sweating bullets. By 9:11, the vendor meltdown began. An email thread leaked across departments like wildfire. Subject: pulling out of contract. Kylon Data Infrastructure, the company's soon-to-be $40 million partner, had just walked. Someone on their side had seen the news. Erin's reinstatement as DCA under SEC registration. Their risk officer's message went viral inside Kinetic within minutes. They fired their compliance authority without informing regulators. "Pull out now." Erin didn't flinch. She clicked her trackpad once, twice, watching the red flags populate across her screen like a slow-blooming storm. The boardroom was dead quiet, save for the occasional phone buzzing, the shuffle of paper, and the sinking sound of careers collapsing. She leaned back slightly, voice level, almost kind. "Actions have consequences," she said. "Even corporate ones." Nobody dared to meet her eyes. By 9:24 a.m., the fire spread faster than any PR team could contain. A long-term partner in Boston called mid-meeting. Their COO's voice came through the speaker sharp as a blade. "You fired your internal compliance certifier during a restructuring?" Silence. He gave a dry laugh. "Then you can explain that to our shareholders. We're out." The line clicked dead. Collapse number 2. By 9:40, procurement systems were blinking red. Vendors demanded written assurance that Erin Blake had countersigned their renewals, or they'd suspend service. Finance tried to intervene, but their credentials were already disabled. Erin's compliance dashboard had revoked executive access across payroll, contracts, and expense accounts. Every attempt to override was met with a warning: access denied. Authority restricted under Clause 9B. At 10:03 a.m., the SEC portal logged a system ping from an external regulator. Automatic audit trigger. Someone, somewhere, had reported the clause breach. Garrett looked up from his laptop, voice brittle. "It's public. We're under review." Brant cursed under his breath, the kind of sound that ends careers. The legal team scrambled to draft containment statements, but Erin had already uploaded her own memorandum to the official archive. 1 page, no rhetoric, just the facts. Unauthorized termination of the designated compliance authority occurred at 12:31 p.m. All executive actions thereafter are suspended pending validation. Signed, Erin Blake, DCA. Time-stamped, witnessed, irreversible. The boardroom turned into triage. Phones rang, messages piled up, assistants whispered outside the glass walls. HR tried to reopen access to calm employees, but the internal network rerouted everything through compliance first. Erin didn't gloat. She just kept working, line by line, restoring critical systems that actually mattered. Employee payrolls, vendor safety certifications, insurance renewals. The essentials kept running. Everything else, the perks, the bonuses, the backdated performance reallocations, remained frozen. At 10:45, Rhea whispered, "They're calling this the Clause 9B event." Aaron barely looked up. Let them. She wasn't here for headlines. She was here for accuracy. By 11 a.m., finance reported that over 70 internal transactions had been reversed, totaling nearly $9 million. Someone muttered, "That's the quarter gone." Aaron finally spoke, quiet but firm. "No, that's the fraud gone." The next alert hit like thunder. The company's biggest partner, Kylon Tech, issued a public statement suspending collaboration pending internal compliance verification. Stock prices dropped 7% in an hour. PR tried to call Aaron for comment. She declined the call. They'd treated her like a ghost for years. Now she let the silence answer for her. By noon, the boardroom looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Half the directors had fled to side meetings. HR's fruit trays wilted untouched. A few execs sat staring at blank laptops, faces pale, phones buzzing with reporters. Aaron stayed centered, calm, a still point in the storm. Garrett passed her updates on sticky notes rather than speak out loud. Every so often, she nodded and typed a few commands, unlocking one department, locking another. At 12:18 p.m., 3 executives quietly changed their LinkedIn status to open to work. One of them was Brant's golf buddy, the same man who'd laughed loudest at her firing. The irony didn't even register for Aaron anymore. It was just numbers. By 12:30, legal confirmed what everyone already suspected. The clause breach automatically transferred internal oversight authority back to the DCA until the CEO rescinded it, which Keene hadn't. Which meant Aaron wasn't just reinstated. She was in command. She finally closed her laptop, looked around the room, and said evenly, "We can start rebuilding now, or keep pretending nothing happened. One path restores integrity. The other ends in subpoenas." No one replied. The faint hum of the AC filled the silence like a dirge. Outside, the skyline glared through glass, a city alive and merciless. Aaron stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked to the window. Her reflection looked calm, unbreakable. For the first time in years, she wasn't the background analyst cleaning other people's messes. She was the firewall, and the system was finally listening. At 1:06 p.m., the conference screen blinked to life again. The room collectively tensed, breaths shallow, as Jonathan Keene's face reappeared. Same dimly lit background, same unblinking gaze. His voice was quieter now, but sharper, like steel drawn across glass. "This is the final directive," he said. "Effective immediately, all compliance matters will report directly to Aaron Blake. No intermediaries, no board votes, no appeals." The sentence landed like a verdict. The executives around the table didn't move, didn't breathe. Keene leaned forward, eyes like coals under ash. "This is not a trial period. This is restoration and enforcement. You broke the clause that kept this company safe. You did it to save face, and now you answer for it." He didn't say her name again. He didn't have to. Every pair of eyes turned toward Aaron. She stayed perfectly still, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Keene's stare lingered on the room like a heat lamp over ice. "You know what I find fascinating?" he said. "You spend millions on legal counsel, yet none of you read the only contract that mattered." A beat. She did. The feed ended abruptly. No goodbye, no pleasantries. Just silence. Garrett stood next, voice low but firm. "Per directive, the following individuals are under formal investigation for obstruction of oversight, bypassing compliance controls, and falsification of documentation." He began reading names. Brant, Chloe from HR, Morton the CFO, 2 directors from operations. Each name fell like a hammer strike. "Effective immediately. All of you are suspended pending outcome. Please surrender your devices and credentials. Chloe stammered something about miscommunication, but Garrett cut her off. Miscommunication doesn't deactivate a badge, Chloe. Security entered quietly. 2 officers in gray suits. No handcuffs, no drama, just procedure. Each suspended exec placed their phones on the table with trembling hands. Brandt's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. His face looked carved from marble, pale, brittle, seconds from cracking. The room was airless. Erin stood, straightened her coat, and took the silver laptop Garrett handed her. It bore the company seal and a small engraved nameplate. Blake, E. Oversight Authority. She opened it. No password prompt. Just a biometric scan and a soft green light. Access granted. The entire compliance dashboard loaded instantly. Not reinstated, upgraded. Garrett looked at her. You're live. She nodded once. Then let's get to work. Her voice wasn't cold. It was surgical. Measured. She began issuing commands, methodically reversing approvals and clearing flagged files. Each click echoed like a countdown. At 1:23 p.m., an automatic company-wide alert appeared on every device. Compliance restructure initiated. Oversight Authority. Erin Blake. It wasn't just reinstatement. It was realignment. For the first time in the company's history, compliance sat above the board. Someone from finance, young and nervous, whispered, "What happens to the partner contracts?" Erin didn't look up. We rebuild clean, or we don't rebuild at all. By 1:40 p.m., HR had stopped pretending to manage optics. PR was drafting apologies no one would believe. The company's Slack threads filled with speculation, fear, and the slow drip of reality. Every shortcut, every backdated waiver, every executive favor now under forensic review. And the person leading it wasn't angry. She was precise. Garrett leaned over. "We'll need to notify the SEC formally." Erin replied, "Already done?" She turned her screen slightly. The confirmation email glowed with an official seal. Received, Section 9B activation acknowledged. A junior VP tried to lighten the air. "So, are we safe now?" Erin's gaze flicked toward him, just long enough to make him wish he hadn't spoken. "Safe isn't the goal," she said quietly. "Compliant is." Outside, the city's noise pressed faintly against the glass. Traffic, horns, a distant siren. But inside, the only sound was the steady rhythm of her typing and the occasional murmur from legal feeding her data. Every keystroke rewrote the hierarchy they thought was permanent. By 2:05 p.m., security had escorted the suspended executives out. The heavy glass door shut with a muffled click. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Garrett exhaled, almost in disbelief. "You realize, Erin, this changes everything." She glanced up from her screen, tone even. "No," she said. "This just restores what should have never been broken." The air in the boardroom hung dense and brittle, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Most of the executives had gone pale, their voices swallowed by the weight of what had just unfolded. Garrett stood again, a single sheet of old paper trembling slightly in his hand. "Before we adjourn," he said, tone grave, "there's one final clause the CEO instructed me to read into the record." Everyone froze. A few exchanged panicked looks, some already half standing to leave, but sat back down as if gravity had doubled. Garrett unfolded the document, its edges yellowed and watermarked, the kind of paper that carries consequences. "This was ratified in 2021, he said evenly. "Majority vote, no abstentions." He began to read slowly, each word like a nail in a coffin. Should termination of the designated compliance authority occur improperly, the board of directors executing said termination without required authorization thereby waives all collective indemnity for financial misreporting, regulatory misstatement, and fiduciary breach occurring within that fiscal year. The sentence landed with surgical precision. Silence. Absolute, and suffocating. Someone exhaled audibly, a shaky sound in the stillness. Then Garrett looked up. Meaning, he clarified, you're not just exposed as a company. You're exposed personally. A murmur rippled through the room, part disbelief, part horror. The head of HR, Chloe, who'd handed Aaron the envelope 2 days earlier, looked ready to vomit. CFO Morton's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered against the table. Brandt, the acting CEO, muttered something inaudible, then stopped when Aaron turned her head toward him. Her expression didn't change, but it was enough to silence the room again. One board member whispered, "We're finished." Another closed his laptop gently, placed both palms on it like it was a tomb, and said flatly, "We're fud." Garrett didn't argue. No one did. HR's polished confidence from yesterday had evaporated. Chloe now sat small in her chair, eyes glassy, hands twisting in her lap. The legal associate at the corner began typing furiously, time-stamping every word, trying to preserve proof they'd just followed orders. Aaron remained standing, the manila folder still tucked under her arm. Keene's directive echoed faintly in their minds. You broke the clause that kept this company safe. Every one of them understood it now. The safety net they'd relied on, the corporate armor of plausible deniability, was gone. They weren't just incompetent. They were liable. Personally, financially, irrevocably. Aaron didn't gloat. She didn't offer comfort either. She stepped forward, her heels soft against the carpet, and laid her folder on the table. She looked around the room slowly, deliberately, eyes steady on each face. You built your authority on shortcuts, she said quietly. On exceptions, on thinking compliance was a suggestion instead of a structure. You forgot the one thing that mattered. She tapped the folder once with her finger. The fine print. Her tone wasn't angry. It was final. She slid the folder back under her arm, closed her laptop, and clipped her new badge onto her blazer. The black stripe shimmered under the overhead light, embossed with a small silver symbol, an eagle clutching a shield. Executive security clearance. Only 3 people had one. Now she was one of them. She turned toward the exit. Next time, she said, voice calm but cutting. Read what you sign. Then she walked out. No smile, no backward glance, no dramatic pause for effect. Just the sharp echo of her footsteps fading down the hall until the door shut with a soft, mechanical click. For a long moment, nobody moved. The boardroom was a graveyard of frozen faces and dying careers. Chloe stared at the table, whispering to herself. Brandt slumped back, gray with defeat. Morton leaned forward, head in his hands. Garrett finally broke the silence. We'll need external counsel, he said. But everyone knew it was too late. The damage wasn't reputational anymore. It was structural. Outside, sunlight spilled across the glass atrium. Indifferent, bright, unstoppable. Aaron walked through the lobby alone, her badge glinting as security doors opened automatically. Employees passing by stepped aside instinctively. None of them knew the details yet, but they could feel it. Something fundamental had shifted. By the time she reached the street, her phone buzzed. An email from the CEO. 2 words. Well done. Aaron smiled faintly, just once. Not triumph. Closure. She slipped the phone into her pocket, lifted her chin, and stepped into the noise of the city. The company would recover, maybe, but it would do so on her terms now, under the watch of the woman they'd underestimated, the one who read the fine print while everyone else chased applause. And somewhere, in the boardroom she'd left behind, silence lingered like a verdict.